It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey Not the Face with your host John Nash and your producer me, Steffi Haynes. And today we are going to talk about the UFC. We're going to specifically talk about Alex Pereira. We're going to look at some things that Dana White said about the White House card. We're going to do a little bit of hodgepodge news topics as well. We're going to look at something with Eddie Hearn. We're going to look at something with Silver Lake. We're even going to look at something with GFL. But we're going to lead off with a new update in the Lee versus Zuffa settlement. Now, if you want access to all of that, you're going to need to subscribe with your money because some of this will be behind a paywall. Now, John, how the hell are you?
Good, except I'm being assaulted by my cat. She is offended that we're not having some time together. I guess you wanted to watch the football game. She's upset that you took me away from the Kansas City game.
Yeah.
She's a big, just like Taylor Swift, she's a big Kelsey fan.
So let's go ahead and kick things off with this update on the Lee versus Zuffa settlement. What is it?
Well, we talked about last week, we actually talked about several weeks, that there was an order, a motion pending, with the judge had to sign to grant it was the plaintiff's motion for disbursement of the net Lee v. Zuffa settlement fund. In other words, the money that was left over after the attorney fees, all the expenses, that was going to be just basically the money, as we're calling it, the money owed to the fighters, to be paid out. It hadn't gone out yet, because the judge had not yet signed the order. And lo and behold, today, look up on Pacer, on the court filings, there is the motion has been posted. And at the very bottom, we can see that Richard F. Boulware, the second United States District Judge, has signed it with the date of October 3rd, 2025, which of course was Friday. So, they obviously didn't want to post it Friday. They wanted to wait over the whole weekend to keep all the fighters stressing out as to why they have not yet got their money. So that is good news. Fighters should now be getting their money soon. We will, I think, my understanding is within a couple days, it just takes a couple days to set it in motion. So probably before the end of the week, the check should start going out. Electric payment should be done. And then the mail will go out, and I don't know how long it takes for the mail to reach people, but people should start. Well, so first news of fighters getting their money should come before the end of the week, and that's good news for everybody. And if you're a fighter, I should note, it warned you, the checks are only valid for 90 days, then they become void, and you get no extra check. I mean, if you lose your check, you could probably ask for another one. I didn't see anything about that. But if you don't cash your check within 90 days, it is void. You do not get that money. So I would recommend cashing, get the money into your bank accounts as soon as possible so you don't forget and then miss out on your money.
Now, I saw that one fighter was able to make a claim for his money or her money after the deadline. Any guesses as to who it might be? Do you think it's Moicano?
Everybody thinks it's Moicano. I don't think it is. But it's, I don't know who it is, but it was funny. I saw that earlier that that was announced earlier that there's one fighter that missed the deadline. They had a discussion and they gave him permission to file late. It's interesting too that this goes hand in hand with, there was one fighter that opted out during the whole opt-out phase. And that fighter, though, that opted out was a fighter that wasn't even eligible. He had actually, his last fight was before the deadline started for the Lee v. Zuffa case. So he wasn't even a class member, and he was the only one that submitted a form saying, I want to opt out of this case.
That's because he knew he wasn't eligible, so he made a gesture. Performative. I
think it's actually, I think the funnier part is it was not performative, because then later he sent in, he goes, I want to retract my opt out and take part of this case.
Really?
So it's like,
wow.
Just like there's, I've talked to several fighters that missed the deadline, and I think they've And I think they've contacted the plaintiffs several times, hoping that there's some loophole that'll get them in. And I can understand it's somewhat sad if you fought, let's say, with Strikeforce when they were bought by the UFC or Zuffa, I should say, but you didn't get any UFC fights, you're not eligible, even though it's a Zuffa company. Same with WEC, or if you just, whatever reason you did not fight in the UFC, your last fight took place before the class period. I can understand the frustration some fighters might feel that they just missed out. And then there's other fighters who have been public about it, like Josh Barnett, that they're a little frustrated that their earlier fights do not count as part of the settlement. But there's a period, there's a statute of limitations, there's a class period, all that goes into effect, and it only impacts the class period.
Now, after the UFC 320 card, they had the post-fight press conference, and Dana White said that the UFC was planning a massive event for January to kick off the Paramount deal. Do you think they'll put more effort into their matchmaking consistently, or are we just going to see more of what we got from the ESPN deal with the, guaranteed money?
Well, we'll see what happens going forward. The UFC deal, or I should say the ESPN deal, started out pretty good. The cards they put on, they always try. It seems like when they ever get a new deal, like with the Fox deal, they come out with all guns blazing, right? It's only later when it peters out and they're going to go to another network do they stop putting their best foot forward, because now we already know they're leaving that network and they're going to somewhere else. So why put their best effort on this dying platform that they're on currently? So I do believe they'll come out, try to put their best presentation, keep Paramount super happy in the beginning. I think the first card will be, relatively stacked. I think the White House show will have a relatively good event. I don't think it'll be ridiculously stacked, because there's just, people keep throwing out all these names as if they're all going to be on it. I don't think that's possible, because they're just not going to put that many people onto an event. It's a kind of a waste. But I think the big thing about how good they have next year is how much effort do they go to get, stars back in the UFC. I think one guy we name that floats is Francis Ngannou, who, as they talk about repeatedly over at PFL, has one fight left. And I've said numerous times, I think technically, based on what I've heard about his contract, that his contract should be up on the terms. But apparently, I don't know if he adjusted it, if they had went back and made changes to it, or if he just decided he wants to complete the contract. But when Francis gets done with his contract, if the UFC is interested in getting him back to the UFC, if they make him an offer, they have the potential to have 2 years probably worth of just massive fights at heavyweight, based on, they have if they can get John Jones to come back, who knows where his head is right now with his brother's death, with potential Pereira moving up to heavyweight, and of course with Tom at heavyweight champion. There's just a string of massive fights they could put on at heavyweight if they want to. So I think that'll be the tell, is the effort they put to put those heavyweight fights together.
Now, going back to UFC 320, Alex Pereira's knockout of Magomed Ankalaev hit nearly 10 million views on YouTube in less than 24 hours. What do you make of that?
I'd make that it was an exciting knockout. It was pretty impressive. He's a known commodity. It was an impressive knockout. And possibly, I think it might indicate too that a large number of people that normally purchase UFC pay-per-views did not purchase it or didn't see this one. And so there were extra bodies there to share the video because, they wanted to see it because they didn't watch the event. I think all those combinations lead to that less people probably ordered the pay-per-view than normal, watched it than normal. I think that seems very likely based on the traffic before. Pereira Alex is a pretty, popular fighter. He might be a little down from his last loss, but also was a spectacular knockout. You put those together and you have the potential for a massive blow up in views, especially coming from a site, YouTube channel like the UFC, which has tons of subscribers. They can get it out to everybody when you're subscribed and you get this update that you have the fight sitting on their platform. I know some people are saying that this shows that they really don't care about ESPN's, pay-per-view rights, kind of screwing over ESPN by posting it right away. I don't quite see it that way because I think they know that, that they were not getting many buyers for this pay-per-view. And also with such a short fight, it's going to be pirated already by other people. So why don't we take advantage of it? This is a little bit like Jennifer Lawrence when she did the nude scene in the movie because nudes had been leaked. She took advantage of that, beat everybody to it because she knew someone else was going to do it. And so why don't I cash in my own? I think this, in many ways, as crude as that sounds, the same as the UFC. Other people are going to pirate this fight. Other people are going to post this on social media. Why don't we do it? And we benefit from it.
Are there any fighters out there that you know of that might be in a deal with the UFC where they get a piece of the social media revenue, like the YouTube views or anything like that?
With the UFC, no. Every UFC contract I've seen, the UFC controls all the video assets, all the rights, the media rights. The fighters have none. Even the highest paid top fighter, the biggest contracts I've ever seen, none of them. We could maybe imagine potentially that someone like Conor McGregor has that, but I sincerely doubt that. In fact, I'm sure of it talking to certain people because I recall asking around when Dustin Poirier had that commercial that showed him knocking out Conor McGregor. Remember that? That came out right after he won. Yeah. Super Bowl ad. And Conor McGregor had no piece of that commercial. He was not asked about it. He gets no payment for that because the UFC owns the rights. So even he does. The only people that own like the media rights on YouTube and stuff are certain boxers. Most boxing contracts call for the promoter to own the media, but certain boxers, they control the rights of that media after the fight. We'll say, I guess, I think Nate Diaz and Jake Paul. I can't believe I almost forgot Jake Paul's name there in my head. Jake Paul. When they had their boxing match, they split the media rights afterwards. So together, those two would control those rights and cash in on the video clips that they played anywhere else.
Now, lots of UFC fighters are very conspicuously calling for Alex to headline the White House card. Do you think that is what's going to happen?
I think there's a possibility. I mean, there seems to be a high demand to see him versus John Jones. So if John Jones wants that fight, I could potentially see that. I mean, the question I have, I guess, is what other fights do they want at the White House? There's a lot of rumors. I know Juani was talking, I think today or yesterday, how there's he's heard rumors either directly from the source or that have some backing behind them, some meat to them that the Ronda Rousey's in training, he might come back. Well, if Rousey's coming back, if that's true, and I have no clue if it is, but it is true. Well, do you want Rousey and Alex and Jones and let's say McGregor? You're not going to have the card filled with that many names unless those people are willing to fight for substantially less than what you'd expect. Then possibly they just fill it up with everybody as a tribute to Trump on his birthday. But for most likely, you'd want to spread it around. But I do think if, Rousey seems unlikely at her age. She complained about CTE damage and, brain issues and just does not seem, like smart for her to come back. So I personally think it's unlikely, but who knows? But if Rousey doesn't, and that's a massive fight, and it has an American and Jones, it seems like the type of fight you'd want on that card. I mean, the card's going to be big already because of the press and the location, but that's the type of massive fight I think that would do well. And I don't know what kind of leverage the two fighters really have because they're both demanding to be on the card. There's no holding out by either one of them for a higher. It doesn't sound that way for higher purses. They just want to be on that card at that location. Now,
you mentioned there that unless they take a significant pay cut, you don't think that UFC would be willing to pay a little more to feature all those names on probably the biggest card ever to be put on and not just UFC, but in all of MMA?
Well, I think they might pay a little more than what they would on a normal card. I think that's a possibility. But are they going to up the purses for all those fighters for this one card? If we got Rousey versus, I don't know who let's say it's I don't know, Holmes or
Kayla.
against Kayla. Yeah, that's right. I mean, oh my gosh, she's going to get killed.
Yeah, but they would want that fight because of their judo
Olympic
rivalry in the Olympics.
Yeah, their Olympic pedigrees and stuff. Yes, they're both medalists. And well, they're going to pay Rousey a ton. She's not coming back for nothing. So let's say they give her $10 million. Kayla's not going to, I mean, she's going to renegotiate based on no longer getting pay-per-views, but I think she'll do it just for the exposure. So, that'll be more. But then, like, are they going to really up the amount they're going to pay Jones? They're really going to up the amount they're going to pay Alex because the card's already going to sell now. You have the return around to Rousey, right? There, at some point, you can add more business by having a deep card, but the fan bases in MMA are somewhat overlapping. People that are going to watch the return of Rousey are also going to watch how many would you've got with the return of Rousey that you'd get for Jones versus Poatan? There's a lot of overlap there, right? Especially if it takes place at the White House. And then if you throw McGregor, and still a lot of overlap. So you're kind of like blowing money on this because you're paying these guys, especially if they're asking for more than they're typical, to be on this card. So, I mean, I could see it potentially because the UFC is making tons of money. Again, this is a salute to Donald Trump in many ways. I could see them stacking it, but I don't see them dipping into the coffers and spending much more than they normally would. I just don't think it's, something they have to do because these fighters want to be on that card. And, if you lose out on one of these stars, the other ones are still going to attract pretty much the same audience.
Okay. Now, speaking of that card, it's changed from Independence Day to Trump's birthday. But there's a little catch there because Trump's birthday is actually on a Sunday. What do you think of that?
Well, are they going to, they're doing the Saturday before the Sunday, right? For the event or not?
From what I understand, they're holding it on his birthday. That's what Trump said.
There's a couple things to think about here. One is that potentially maybe someone put up a stink or said something about, are we going to spend the government money on our 250th anniversary for this private company? And they thought it looked unseemly. I kind of doubt that, but there's a possibility, like they just didn't have the resources. They didn't want to do it. The other possibility, strong possibility is, Trump, he did, they had the march, the parade for in honor of the 250th anniversary of our military, the Army, on his birthday. And Trump seems like he really likes having extravagant events in celebration of himself. So it's also possible that he just asked him to move the event because he'd rather have it for himself than have it assumed for the country. He would prefer to have some event in celebration of himself. I think that's possible. Also, it's kind of hard to say the UFC is not involved in politics when they're holding events specifically for Trump's birthday. The vibes of the emperor watching the gladiators is just it's the metaphor is too strong there to ignore. So all these things come. I don't know the facts yet. I haven't had all the information. Hopefully there's some reporter that will dig into it and tell us. Are there any of the funds that are going to the 250th anniversary? Any of them going to be used to still set up not that we knew that before, but is any of that money going to be used to set up the cage and the event? Are they going to take that money for the 250th anniversary and use it for this? I don't know. So that's got to be looked into. But at the same time, this clearly shows that the UFC is in the bag for Trump in many ways. And Trump's in the bag for the UFC. This is an event he's giving the UFC that they can make a spectacle out of and get huge ratings for. At the same time, this is the UFC on Trump's birthday, giving a show just for him about how great he is, basically. And so the UFC is fully in the Trump camp. And as much as they try to claim they're not involved in politics, they've made it clear over the last few years, they're fully on the side of as an arm of the PR campaign for Trump. And I think this is just more of the same.
Continuing on that track, Dana White said that absolutely no deal with Conor McGregor has been struck for him to appear on that card. And he further went on to say that the UFC has made no deals with any fighter to be on that card yet, despite Conor saying that it was, quote, a done deal. Do you think that Conor will be supplanted in the main event if he is to fight on this card, which, you know me, I firmly believe he is never fighting again. But if they were to book him for the main event or book him for that card, do you think he would main event, or do you think Pereira would get that spot?
Well, if Pereira's fighting Jones, that possibly that'd be the main event. I think if Rousey goes against Kayla, that's the main event because the American Olympic storyline there. If Conor McGregor, who I do not think is going to be on this event, if he does end on up, I think he might be compelled to accept lower on the card. Against Chandler or whoever they put him against. I don't see him again. They're not breaking the bank, and Nate Diaz is not coming back for nothing, right? I haven't heard Nate Diaz excited to fight on this card, even though he's not in the UFC right now. But everybody's throwing that name out of Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz. Finish the trilogy. Nate Diaz is the one fighter I think would be like, what are you going to pay me, and then I'll decide if I'd show up on this card. So if Conor McGregor, I think if he ends up on this card, and they do the other fights are available and they want to put it on this card, then I would imagine he'd probably have to accept, a co-main or something. Now, there's also the possibility that, Donald Trump has put his 2 cents into Dana White, called him and said he wants Conor McGregor on this card and hadn't said anything about John Jones, right? Or Pereira. So if that's the case, then maybe it is Conor McGregor. I don't know, but I just know Conor McGregor has been saying a lot of shit about how he's been, he basically, we've talked about this for a while, and everybody imagines McGregor, and he's a guy that makes a lot of money. Let's not pretend he doesn't make more than any other UFC fighter. The guy makes a lot of money, but I think people project on him like he's a Mayweather figure. He's a Canelo. He's, someone in boxing, even Anthony Joshua, that he's making demands like they can make, and he has that kind of influence and control. And for most of his career, it's just been gross exaggeration by him to try to inflate his position, not a star power. He's as big a star as any of them, but inflate his position in the company, his leverage that he has, the power that he has, that makes people assume that he's getting paid like if he was a boxer. And we know, based on the antitrust lawsuit and even the post 2017 period, just based on the total UFC pay, there's no way McGregor was getting, massive amount of money, because it would throw out the entire pay structure if that was the case. I think his pay fits the model we said, which is somewhere in the, $16 to $20 million per fight category for those 4 fights. If he's getting that, still a lot of money, but he is not getting the amount of money that people constantly throw around, where they imagine he's getting 50, 80, 100 million for fights in the UFC. And I think this is more of Conor McGregor loves that image. He's built a brand on that, of being one of the biggest guys in combat sports, which he is on star power, but he has not been on purse size. And he's just unwilling, I think, to let people acknowledge that, or let the truth get out that he does not make the kind of money that he kind of pretends he does.
Dana seems to be like totally crazy about Alex Pereira, saying people love Alex and he's a dream to have in this organization. How much does the UFC need Poatan right now?
Well, technically they don't need him at all. They've signed a new deal that's in place. It's guaranteed money. They're going to get paid it with or without him. I think what he does, though, is he keeps an energized fan base. And I've talked about in the past, what makes combat sports big, which keeps the audience going, the general audience. A lot of combat sports now is pivoted to being based on gambling. It's a whole different market. But generally what drives combat sports, which the health of combat sports, is based on how recent was the last big fight that everybody wants to talk about. And in boxing, we had it with Canelo versus Crawford. You could kind of see that effect. The fight was huge, and the aftermath was huge. People couldn't stop talking about the outcome because Crawford beat him in a very exciting match that everybody saw. That's good for boxing. And for MMA now, for UFC, what's good for the UFC is the fact that Poatan had this dramatic knockout and return to the limelight after he'd been kind of written off after his last performance. And all anybody's talking about is him versus Tom Aspinall, him versus Jones, him potentially versus Ngannou, right? Big fights, the water cooler big fight talk. And that's healthy. That drives interest into combat sports, and that drives interest in the UFC product. So in that regard, they need them because they have not had much discussion outside of maybe hardcore fans, much discussion in the greater general population, I guess, outside of the beating a dead horse with, whatever Conor McGregor fight's not going to happen. But these are real fights that potentially can be on the horizon, and that drives interest, and that's what you want. So he's been a godsend on that department.
Okay, let me ask you this then. Maybe the UFC doesn't, quote, need him, but how important is he? Is he more important than any other fighter on the roster? Let me ask you that. Is he more important? Technically, I would probably value him more than Jones, even though Jones is probably a bigger attraction right now because there's a greater chance he will fight, and you might get a couple fights. I think he's a bigger attraction than Tom, even though Tom is known as a heavyweight champion, but he's not a massive star. Tom Aspinall has to probably roll off several wins. He hasn't had as many high-profile, dramatic knockouts that Poatan has. Ilya is the only one. I guess I would rate Chimaev potentially has more value because of not only is he popular in the United States, it seems somewhat popular. He's not in the same ballpark as big American stars, but he's known worldwide, but also big in the Middle East, Russia, Middle East, North Africa region, Muslim countries in Russia, which is, and the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, those guys are paying out tons of money right now. So for him alone might be the single most valuable fighter on the roster, I would guess right now, potentially. But domestically in the United States and in another important market, Brazil, I think, Poatan is number 2, and that's important. So, that's a very important fighter. I don't know if I'd rate him number 1 because, he might be currently, I think he might do bigger numbers than Ilya, but Ilya has a longer lifespan probably ahead of him, more fights. But I think I'd rate Chimaev because of his Middle East connections, the amount of revenue that they get, the amount of sales they get over there as the number 1 fighter for them right now, the most important. Okay. One last question on this. We started seeing the UFC, and then also we've started seeing WWE running ICE commercials that are for recruitment of officers. What do you think of that?
Well, it makes sense because if you were going to go round up the worst of immigrants, the criminals, I think you would start with the UFC events. So, you'd want to recruit the people that could recognize those guys, which would be the fans. It's a little disturbing because you see the performance of ICE recently, and there was a story where an MMA fan, a guy that failed, an former MMA fighter failed, and now his goal was to help people bust the heads of Indians because he, I guess, didn't get a tech job. South Asian people, Indians, people from India, he wanted to bust their heads because he blames them for him not being able to get a job in the tech industry as a coder engineer. And those are the last people you probably want to give the authority to arrest people. And especially then you throw in they can give the authority that they can wear masks or not identify themselves and just, randomly grab people and then interrogate later if they're citizens or not. So you'd think you'd want some quality control on who you're going to have as a member of these agencies, and sending a broad-based ad to MMA fans who, I don't know if you've been to, I know you have been to a live event, but or been to a bar, but there's a sizable percentage of douchebags there. And as an MMA fan, I can say that because I guess I'm one of them. But those are not the people I'd want in positions of authority, and yet that's the net they're casting, as those are the people they're trying to recruit. So I do not see how this ends well. Let's put it that way.
All right, it's time for us to switch gears for our last 3 questions. There is a legal challenge to Silver Lake's acquisition of Endeavor. What do we know about that? To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Ooh! Okay, the face!